Okay, so I think Bob Gibbons introduced two very useful terms. One is framing, and the other one is stories. So I think the first thing, Jordi, is, and you always manage this, we've had 4 great stories. And I think maybe I tried to conclude by mapping a little bit, seeing whether the stories we had here at the end, how they map up with the academic papers we had throughout the day. So in that sense, the first thing I started off with Paula Sapienza's definition. So if you remember Paula's definition, it was culture is shaped by the preferences that are shaped by other factors, and then they're transmitted from generation to generation. Now that framing, of course, then can drive the way you analyze the stories that we've heard. And actually her framing fits the 4 stories extremely well. So we had 2 controlled companies from Europe, IKEA and Zegna. We had 2 widely held corporations from the United States. Now Wells Fargo is the oldest, 1852. HP is slightly younger. It's a post, of course, moving out of the garage in Palo Alto. But in both cases, the founders have definitely disappeared. Now, in the case of IKEA, we heard that actually the founder disappeared. Well, he died he passed away quite recently, and it's now actually a foundation or 2 people, as we heard, who are taking over, and they have to see how they're going to transmit the vision, the values, the preferences of the founder, and we'll have to see what that looks like in 100 years from now, actually. Now, and then, of course, we had Zegna, which is now 112 years old, okay, and the family is still in control. I actually, since I'm interested in corporate control structures, I looked up your tenure voting structure in the Netherlands and all the rest of it. So rest assured, hedge fund activists is not an issue for Zegna, okay? So anyway, so there, the family, it really depends on the values of the family. And, we can maybe over dinner discuss where the values of your family come from, whether that fits Paula's definition, how those values translate into the way you run the company. I think you gave a hint here. I guess you're familiar with Luca Garavoglia of Campari. He was in Milan a few weeks ago. He said, my vision is, I have a vision, I appoint the CEO, and I want the CEO to do what I want. So he has a very clear vision of the way he wants the company to be run. And you said clarity. I mean, he was extremely clear, but that's the way he is. And then going back to the widely held companies, there, of course, the board is extremely important, because in some sense, the board becomes the institution that interprets the way that the culture was formulated. And we heard in the case of Wells Fargo, something clearly went wrong. We know that Alex's paper played a role. Certainly, and Xavier mentioned this in his discussion, certainly the way we're incentivized mattered. Now we can debate why they were paid the way they were paid, and so forth. So so I think the analysis we had actually fits this very well. Now then, of course, Gillian had a different definition, which also works. It works very well for the question that she asked. And that, of course, comes to Bob Gibbons' other term, which I really enjoyed, which is that culture, I think he said, is a weasel of a word. So that, of course, doesn't lend itself very well to empirical work. And then Alex said, what's really then not so good is if you explain things, and then what's left over, the intangible that's left over, it's called culture. I mean, that's not really ideal. And I think we didn't try to do that today. So what's next? I think IESE-ECGI has defined a program on responsible capitalism, which has actually 3 pillars. One is responsible investment, the other one is families, and the third one is corporate purpose. And there, I think you were the first to introduce it, Rodolfo. So it seems to me that corporate culture and purpose fit naturally together, but we also have family, and we also have responsible investment. And I think somebody said it's actually, well, it was actually, I think Bob Gibbons again, he said that these things don't happen in isolation. So what happens around you, the economic system you're in, that seeps into the culture, and actually the culture also influences the way the economic system works. So I think it actually works extremely well for our responsible capitalism program, and I think we should definitely include corporate culture in the program, Jordi, and that's really thanks to you. So I'm looking forward to the edition of this conference next year, which I think Jordi will say something about, and I invite all of you to the inaugural Responsible Capitalism Summit of the ECGI in Brussels on the 21st of October. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. Well, as you say, it's always a pleasure to listen to Marco wrapping this conference up in such a nice, clear, gentle, and I would say persuasive way. Thank you very much, Marco, for the great collaboration with ECGI, between ECGI and IESE. And we'll look forward to keep working with you, not just on this conference, but on many other initiatives that you are undertaking. I think that many of us, we have spoken during the breaks, the relatively brief breaks. Some of you complain about how short the breaks were, but this is life. We cannot have longer days. But one of the things that I think were many of us fascinated by this conference is how a very specific topic, which is corporate culture, of which we all think that is quite relevant, but at the same time, we understand how complex it is, both for academics to try to formalize it and model it and understanding, and also for CEOs and senior executives and board members to actually managing as well, as we saw in the last panel. We understand the difficulty, but also I think we had a very good, very fruitful day of discussions. And I think that one of the key dimensions that I like to consider about this conference is the fact that we don't have just one perspective on things, which is what sometimes happens in many academic conferences, because you have disciplines and each discipline has its own set of standards. I think this conference by design wants to be interdisciplinary, wants to nourish ideas and foster ideas coming from different disciplines, from corporate finance, corporate law, corporate strategy, organizational economics. And I think that this creates, I think, a very rich context to think about those dimensions. I think the 5 papers that we had today also reflect this diversity, and perhaps none of them by themselves captures the complexity of the issue. But I think that we have been able to understand a bit better some dimensions of this very relevant, very interesting issue of corporate culture. So I want to thank you again, all the speakers who've made really fantastic presentations in today's conference. Also the discussants, moderators, also members of this CEOs panel. I think we had a fantastic set of ingredients, ideas, and reflections. I also want to thank again Marco and ECGI and the whole team for being very supportive of this conference. Big pleasure, Marco. And I also want to, last but not least, I also want to thank all the team here at IESE who have been putting a lot of effort to try to make this conference, both the in-person side of the conference here, but also the online conference, being very much, I would say, lively and efficient. So I would like to thank you all. And those of you who stay for dinner is 1 floor downstairs in the main dining room of the school. And those of you who have to leave, come back soon. Thank you very much.